Hi and welcome to the Small Holding. This is the greenhouse where we've been growing tomatoes this year, and they've been very successful. A few weeks ago we published a video on dealing with the tomato glut, and one of the things we talked about was making tomato powder. Our subscribers have asked us to make this video showing that full process. So today I'm going to show you how to make that powder, and I'm also going to show you how we use it here and how we apply it. So hopefully you'll get some inspiration. So come and join us. Hi, my name's Fiona, and this is full of ripe tomatoes. Now, anyone who's ever grown tomatoes knows that there's two real stages. There's a stage where all the tomatoes are green and you're waiting for them to ripen, and it seems to take forever. And then there's a second stage where it seems like everything has ripened all at once. And for us, there's far more than we can eat at one stage. So, because we're a small holding and we want to make use of everything that has ripened, we need to preserve all of those extra tomatoes. We do multiple things with them. We do pressure can some, we do make sun-dried tomatoes, but one of the most versatile saving and preserving ways that we use for these tomatoes is to make a tomato powder. It's so useful and can be used in so many different recipes. You can make it up into a puree and use it on pizza bases. You can make it up into a tomato base sauce for pasta. But I'll get onto that later. The first thing I need to do is show you how to make the powder to begin with, then how to store it, and then we'll get onto the recipes. So the first stage is get some of these tomatoes picked. My aim today is to pick 1 kilo of tomatoes. That's so that when they've been dehydrated and made into a tomato powder, I can show you just how much water weight has been lost and how little storage space you'll need for a powdered version of that full kilo of tomatoes. Collecting tomatoes for the long-term preserving means that I'm normally far pickier than I might be when gathering tomatoes to eat them fresh. I try to pick fruits that have been ripened but aren't so ripe that they're soft. Today it is getting to the end of the season in our greenhouse, so I'm picking as many of the ripe tomatoes as I can. Some of them are more ripe than I would normally pick, but it just means that they're quite soft and will take longer to dry in the dehydrator. Some even split when I try and remove them from the vine. As long as they split at this point and not were already split, it's fine to pick them. Any fruits that were already split could potentially have invited insects inside or bacteria, and personally I wouldn't use these for tomatoes that I'm preserving for the long term. I don't want to be storing up problems for the tomato powder in the future, and I want to make sure that it's got the longest possible shelf life. In the end, I've picked 1004 grams of tomatoes, so just over a kilo. I'm going to give them a very quick wash before I take them out for slicing for the dehydrator. It's such a beautiful late autumn day. I've decided to bring the kilo of tomatoes out into the garden to slice them. And once I've sliced them, I'm going to put them into our dehydrator, and this is the one I'm going to use. Now, we do have a smaller dehydrator, the type of thing you find in the Sunday paper supplements, you know, what we call the books of much stuff. And that's perfectly adequate, but actually today I'm having to harvest some apples too, so I need the big unit. The kilo of tomatoes won't fill that many trays, but I'll fill it up with far more produce. Each tray is actually quite a large capacity in here, and they're lined with this mesh guard. Tomatoes could go straight onto there, but I actually find it's quite difficult to peel them off afterwards. So I'm going to use these specialist liners which come with the unit, and it's like a glossy paper, but it does mean I can easily peel tomatoes off this paper at the end of the process. It's really easy to use this unit. It's got two very simple controls. One is for heat and 1 is for time. And the heat dial has a guide next to it, so it's entirely up to you whether you're dehydrating meat or fruit or vegetables, and the guide will tell you roughly what temperature to use. And for me, because I want these tomatoes dried within an inch of their lives, I want them very crispy so that we can make tomato powder, I'm going to put the dehydrator on to the maximum time setting, which in this case is 26 hours, and then check to see whether it needs to go back on for a little bit more. But I better get on and start slicing. In our video dealing with a tomato glut, we were making some sun-dried tomatoes, which we then preserved within an olive oil. And we advise cutting the tomatoes on a specific plane, and that is downwards alongside these stalks. And that's because these stalks can actually be quite woody. So by cutting it in that way, it's much easier to remove that section. But as you can see, we're actually removing a bit of the flesh too. Because we're making powder in this scenario, the texture of that section actually is fairly irrelevant because we're going to grind it right down. So why not make use of that fleshy part? The other problem with cutting on that plane is that sometimes when you move these slices over to the dehydration tray, that those seeds can fall out, particularly with your larger tomatoes. So for me, when I'm making powder, I prefer to put the tomato on its side and cut on a different plane. It just means those seeds are better contained and they're not left on the cutting board when I transfer them to the dehydration tray. I finished slicing the tomato, so now it's time to put all of those trays into the dehydrator, pop the lid on, make sure the temperature is of the right level, and here I'm going for fruits, and that's 135 degrees Fahrenheit or 57 degrees Celsius. And then I'm going to select the maximum time possible. It's not possible to take too much water out of the tomatoes for the powdering process because they need to be brittle dry to be ground down to that fine powder for long-term storage. So I'll come back and check tomorrow. I've removed the 2 trays from the dehydrator. Now, I originally thought they'd take 26 hours. They actually took a further 12 hours beyond that, probably because I'd sliced the slices a little bit thick and I'd left the seeds in there, which always means they take a little bit more time. You don't have to leave the seeds in. You could decide to de-seed, but I think they add a bit more flavour. And what you're actually looking for at the end of the process is that the slices snap. And as you can see, although the slices were very thick, they're actually painfully thin now. One of the reasons I said that I used the glossy paper was that it's easy to remove the slices. And as you can see, all I'm doing is giving these a little bit of a push and they're releasing from the glossed paper. If they were on this mesh, it would take me a while to remove them. This is the second tray. I've already put the first tray into the blender, and once I've released them, all I do is pour them in. I've still got some more to do, so let me do those and I'll come back to you in a second. Once I've got the dried slices in the blender, all I need to do is make sure that the safety lid and catch are in place and then turn the blender on. It's so easy. You might need to give it a little bit of a struggle part way through to release any large parts that are caught, and then just turn it back on. How finely you decide to grind the tomato slices is entirely up to you. Because I've left the seeds in because I think they add some flavour, I don't like to completely grind all the seeds up. It's actually the seeds which turn to powder last. So I'll keep it going until the slices themselves are ground, but I can still see 1 or 2 tomato seeds in there. If you remember at the start of the process, we had 1,004 grams, so just over a kilo of tomatoes. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to use this jam funnel into a jar and pop it on the scales and then see just how much weight we've actually lost. quite a fine powder there, so bear with me. There was a little bit of tomato left in the bottom, so let me just get that released. The scales now are coming in at 64 grams. So you've lost over 900 grams of weight, 940 to be exact. That's how much water's in those tomatoes. So you can see from a storage perspective how useful this process is. What I'm going to do now is show you a couple of recipes that we use to make use of this tomato powder. But that is what a kilo of tomatoes looks like once it's in its powdered state. Very small, very compact. The first recipe that we make use of this tomato powder for is on pizza as the sauce base. Now please excuse the blue gloves. I've been painting windows today and my hands smell of chemicals and paint, and I really don't want it on my food. We're going to have a salami chorizo, red onion and mushroom topping, but let me show you how we use this tomato powder first. We've taken a lot of water out of the tomatoes, so we only need a very small amount to rehydrate to make up a puree for a tomato base. So I'm adding just a teaspoon and a half into a bowl. Once that's done, I'm going to add 25 millilitres of water. Now ideally we should be doing this a number of hours before we actually need it, because you can see it takes quite a bit of time for the tomato powder to absorb that water. So let's take a break and come back to that in a moment. After 2 minutes, the tomato powder has absorbed a lot of the water, and I'm going to add some Italian herbs in. That gives it that more traditional pizza flavour. I'm going to mix it up a little bit more and just get all of that flavour in place. As you can see, it has thickened quite significantly, but I'm going to keep stirring just for a little bit longer. After 4 minutes, I'm going to start spreading this tomato powder puree onto the pizza. Now, for me, I think this is still too thin, but I wanted to give you a practical demonstration of how long it takes to rehydrate tomato powder. So this is 4 minutes. So this is for me when I'm impatient. And I'm now going to go and get some tomato puree, which I've allowed to soak with the tomato powder and water for around 5 hours so that you can see the difference. It's easy to see just how much thicker this mixture is. The reality is the longer you can leave the tomato powder to rehydrate, the better. Overnight it's absolutely ideal. Now I need to finish off making up that pizza. And there we are, all ready to go in the oven. A little bit of time in the oven and the pizza's ready to eat. And I have to say, it's absolutely delicious, even if I say so myself. Another easy recipe to make is a simple pasta recipe. So I've taken 16 grams of the tomato powder and I added 100 millilitres of boiling water, and I've left it for about half an hour so that the tomato powder has reabsorbed as much of that water as possible. I've then added into a frying pan with a little bit of olive oil, a whole chopped onion, half a green pepper finely chopped, and 200 grams of mushrooms, and I've just tried to give it a little bit of colour, as you can see. I'm now going to add that tomato into the hot frying pan with the mushrooms and the onions. And I'm going to add a little pinch of Italian herbs. And that tomato should thicken up a bit. Now what I'm going to do is I've got another 100 millilitres of boiling water, which I'm going to add in. And I'm just going to stir that for a little while and let that boil down some more so that the powder absorbs more of that water and it becomes a thicker sauce. So let's come back to that in a couple of minutes. After only a moment or two, the sauce has thickened up beautifully and it's ready to serve with that pasta. And there you have it, a complete pasta dish. This makes 2 large portions for 2 people and is vegetarian friendly. So please give it a try and enjoy. As you can see, I have a little bit of tomato mixture left over. If I leave that, the powder will keep absorbing the water and it could set like concrete. So the way that I keep it usable for just a little bit longer is to add some olive oil, mix that in, and then that mixture can be used for quite a bit longer. It will keep for a few days in the fridge. Well, there you are, powdered tomato, an incredibly easy way to preserve all of those excess tomatoes that you might be growing. And it's very versatile and can be used in so many ways. And providing it's in those airtight Kilner type jars, it'll last for months and months and months. If you have liked this content, take a moment and give me a thumbs up below. If you're not already a subscriber, come and join us. If you hit that bell icon, you'll be notified of any new videos as soon as they become available. If you've got any questions for me, just leave them in the comments section and I'll get back to you as quickly as I can. Or if there's any videos you'd like us to make that you haven't seen, leave those in the comments too, and I'll do my best to see if we can make that content for you. Thanks for watching, and I look forward to seeing you next time.